Hello, talking animals. Henry Audubon here. Thanks for tuning in to Game Design Rules. Last night I was playing The Binding of Isaac, and it got me thinking about going beyond the maximum in games. As you may know, Binding of Isaac draws a lot of its inspiration from The Legend of Zelda, and in The Legend of Zelda, a certain system of handling health and hit points was established that is now very commonly found in games. You have a certain amount of starting health that is your maximum amount of hearts, which are represented at the top of the screen. When you take damage from an enemy, you lose hearts, right? And as you play, you have opportunities to find hearts. This system is interesting for many reasons, but I want to talk about two in particular. One is that crucially, there's a maximum number of hearts, right? And there are a number of reasons for doing this, but one is that you want to be able to give the player hearts on a fairly regular basis. You want players to be able to recover from battles, recover their strength, and move forward in the game. So imagine a world where there were no hearts that you could pick up to recover your health. What would Legend of Zelda be like then? Well, it would be like you start with your maximum and then you're slowly whittled down and you experience this kind of death of 1,000 cuts that I think is not very exciting and, you know, is really a kind of long grind on the player where, you know, it becomes a kind of war of attrition or something. So you want to be able to dish out these hearts and not worry about the problem of players just farming hearts and getting up to some, really enormous amount of health and then going into a boss fight and just saying it's clobbering time and making a mess of things, okay? So this is the reason for having maximum health. Another feature of this system that I want to point out is that the way to recover hearts is usually by killing enemies. And that's interesting because enemies are the cause of you losing hearts, right? So it's this nice source of conflict within the game. And it's an opportunity for players to take risks or make sacrifices, which is very important to gameplay. So a player who is at below their maximum health can take a bit of a risk and try to defeat an enemy in the hopes of not taking any damage in the process and getting a heart as a reward. So that's interesting from a gameplay perspective. Now, when this system is ported over from a kind of more adventure-style game like Legend of Zelda into a more traditional action-style game like The Binding of Isaac, then some complications can arise. So in The Binding of Isaac, as I've mentioned, it takes a lot of inspiration from The Legend of Zelda and it also draws in a lot of roguelike elements, but at its core, in terms of its core gameplay, it is really a twin-stick shooter. It's an action game. And I want to point out a problem that can arise with the traditional Legend of Zelda health system in action games. And then I want to discuss how Binding of Isaac gets around this problem in a very elegant way. So the problem is that when you have full health and there are hearts lying around for you to pick up, then at least to a certain extent it doesn't matter whether or not you get hit. Now, I understand there are corner cases where it would matter, but there are many times when it wouldn't matter at all. If you get hit, you can grab the hearts. If you don't get hit, just leave them behind and move forward and, doesn't matter, okay? Now, this is a problem because in twin-stick shooters, getting hit should always be a big deal, at least in my opinion, unless it's a special power-up like in Mario, you grab a star and then for 10 seconds it doesn't matter whether or not you get hit. That's a special case, and that's a kind of peak moment within the game where, it's exciting, the music changes, and it's a special event. But you don't want this coming up in this really mundane way where people are like, oh, I just have so many hearts where it doesn't matter whether or not I get hit. Right? You don't want this coming from a surplus of resources, just because that's boring. So how do you get around this problem where sometimes it doesn't matter whether or not you get hit? Well, one way is to introduce the soul hearts, which is what Binding of Isaac does. So for those of you who don't know, soul hearts are kind of like armor. They are blue hearts that go in front of your red hearts. They allow you to go kind of beyond your maximum number of hearts, and when you take damage, your soul hearts are depleted first. So this is really interesting. And I should mention that soul hearts are quite a bit more rare than regular hearts, right? So the interesting bit about this is that when you have a soul heart, or any number of soul hearts, it always matters whether or not you get hit, right? Because if you get hit, you're losing soul hearts, and there's ultimately no cap on the number that you can have, so you're really losing something when you get hit. And that's interesting, okay? So it's this idea of soul hearts that go beyond the maximum, okay? They allow you to extend your hit points, but it's this resource that is somewhat ephemeral and that it gets depleted first, okay? Now, other games have done armor before, armor that goes on top of your regular health, okay? That's not a new idea at all. I mean, think like in GoldenEye for the N64 or something, you could pick up body armor, which is basically a second set of health, or in Halo, you can get an overshield or something like that goes beyond your regular shield charge. But in these games, I mean, GoldenEye, as an example, once you have max body armor, let's say there's more body armor to be had, then the problem reemerges, right? It's like if you get hit, just grab the body armor. If you don't, leave it behind, right? So the problem isn't really solved by body armor. It's more that it just kicked down the road a little bit. So, but the reason why it's kicked down the road and not solved is because you have a maximum amount of armor that you can hold at any given time, right? If you could just keep growing your armor, then, then it would always matter whether or not you got hit. So the reason why soul hearts work so well is because you don't have to be giving soul hearts out very frequently. You don't have to be constantly dishing them out because the player doesn't have to rely on soul hearts to survive. The player can do just fine with just the regular hearts, but when they get soul hearts, then they have this extra resource to worry about. Next time they get hit, they're going to lose their soul hearts, and that's a real loss. So you can dish them out more infrequently, and the player doesn't have to rely on them, but they still get around this problem quite nicely of making it matter whether or not you get hit. So it's a really elegant solution, I think, to what would otherwise be a very core problem. So they allow you to go beyond the maximum. And I want to just generalize a little bit from soul hearts. And I just want to encourage you to look for opportunities to have the player be able to go beyond a maximum in your game. So look for resources in your game that it's capped. Let's talk about some of the N64 Zelda games had a wallet system where your amount of rupees that you could hold was capped, right? And this is to kind of gate the player so that they can't get access to certain items until they, unlock wallets or whatever. But imagine if there was a certain kind of rupee that would allow you to go beyond your maximum, but the next time that you made a purchase, that kind of rupee would get depleted first. That would have some different consequences that might be interesting. Another idea would be, let's say that your game limits the amount of bombs you can have. Like let's say in Binding of Isaac, actually, that let's say you could only hold a certain number of bombs. But there was a special kind of bomb that would go on top of whatever bombs you already have and allow you to exceed your limit, but would be a special bomb. And the next time you use a bomb, that special bomb would be used first. That's an idea that anybody could toy with. So anyways, it's this idea of going beyond the maximum. It's interesting, and I think the Binding of Isaac does it rather well with the idea of soul hearts. And even this soul heart idea, I think, can be ported over to many other games, and I think it can add a lot of depth to the life system without adding a lot of complexity, because after all, soul hearts are very easy to understand, right? They function nearly identically to regular hearts, except that they ignore maximums and they get depleted first. And it's really a nice system. So thank you very much for tuning in to Game Design Rules, and I'll talk to you later.